I'm John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda pop with our friends. Turn off our cell phones and get away. Night or day, it's John DeSando on the radio. We'll watch the credits from up high and low. Cinema Classics on.
Cinema Classics is produced and hosted by John DeSando. Listen to shows Thursdays at 8:01 p.m. on WCBE 90.5 FM. And listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And once again, I'm Wayne Count Orlock Miller.
And this is Cinema
It
Classics.
sure is, John.
You know, it must have been 30 years ago when we appeared on World Film Classics.
Yep,
And I'm sure we did Nosferatu. Do you
I'm
think?
pretty sure. We did one called Vampire that from
yeah.
the early 1930s, I think a Danish film by Theodore Dreyer, I believe.
That's
was
right.
Famous
That's
for
right. Yeah. We may not have
Joan
done
of Arc.
but who could forget F.W. Murnau's
Oh.
Nosferatu?
I was a little kid when I first saw Nosferatu on TV, and the thing of it is, it was a show, and it had old black and white silent films, but half-hour versions of them that were really cut out. I remember seeing like Hunchback of Notre Dame with Lon Chaney Sr., but also Nosferatu, and that one caught my imagination big time.
There's some iconic shots of him there, and I think it was best reprised by Klaus Kinski in Werner Herzog's Nosferatu in the 70s.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and most characteristically, he has the long fingernails. You know,
Yes.
some of our OCD friends,
Yeah.
they're just dying to cut those nails.
But how good, you know, especially now, our good friend Bela Lugosi, who probably one of the most recognizable vampires, and only comprised his role of Count Dracula in the first movie in 1931, but also in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and which is really interesting. The only two times he actually played Count Dracula, and the Abbott and Costello flick was like 1957 or 47, 48, something like
Well,
that.
this is Robert Eggers directing
Yes.
this one, and he did The Lighthouse a couple of years ago.
Lighthouse, and also one that I think you really like with our little it girl,
The Witch.
the witch.
Yeah, you're right.
Anya.
The Lighthouse had, of course, Willem Dafoe,
Yes.
who seems to be regularly showing up at these
Yes.
horror films.
Yes,
And
but
for good reason.
very good.
Right.
And one thing I know we'll get into more history about vampire movies
Yeah.
in our podcast, Double Take. But interesting about Defoe, that in kind of in a way, a spoof of the movies, Shadow of the Vampire 2000, that was really, the premise of that was the making of Nosferatu in 1922. Defoe was in that and played Nosferatu, or played Max Schreck, the
course he
German
would.
actor.
Of course he
who
would.
played Nosferatu.
With a face like that, there's not much you have to do with
Oh
it.
man, yeah, he's not what you would call a pretty boy, but
All right, so with all the iterations of this, how do you estimate it? I mean, what's your reaction to Eggers' Nosferatu that's out in theaters now?
right.
And it's played by the fellow who did it, right?
Yes, Bill Skarsgård,
Yeah.
who in several things in my research for the podcast and the radio show, that they're kind of calling him because of his take on two iconic monsters that he's kind of inherited a mantle of, that would in the past would have gone to Karloff and Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi and even Vincent Price, that he's going to be kind of the go-to guy because he has a very gaunt look about him.
Yeah.
And a couple other things I've seen him in, including a mini-series based on a Stephen King book, that he did a great job in that too.
Well,
this guy's
yeah.
really, really good.
Well, I'm interested in your overall view on this because I know that you were impressed by the Demeter, the
Oh, Last Voyage of the Demeter.
last boy, which came out only a few years
Yes,
ago, and it takes a lot for you to
Oh,
warm up to
and
rats coming out of a coffin.
Well, oh, I want to take a few pets home with me, little rats, to make into pets. But yes, I really like that one. And basically, it was based on part of Bram Stoker's book, Dracula, which is interesting because as a historian, I really like Stoker's book because it was a compilation of letters and journals and newspaper clippings and the ship's log of the Demeter that tells the story rather than a straight narrative line. And that's what I liked about that. I also liked the vampire in that, who was one gnarly looking dude, kind of like Shrek's Count Orlok in the original Nosferatu, and of course Klaus Kinski in the classic 1979 Nosferatu, the vampire. And of course the title of the first Nosferatu was Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, and which I thought was interesting. But those guys all looked alike, including two miniseries variations of King's book, Salem's Lot, where you got a tall, bald, pointy-eared, almost rat-like or bat-like.
Well, I think, for instance, when you see this Nosferatu that's currently out there, he's more human than would have expected, which makes it, because I believe this one is more interested in the psychology of the Nosferatu. The others in the horror, as you said from the title, the horror.
Yeah.
But this is really as much about her struggle.
Yes.
The wife.
And one of the things that I read in my research is that he looks like East European, Romanian or Bulgarian or Transylvanian person wearing a big thick coat and a walrus-like mustache, which, interesting enough, outside of Gary Oldman's Dracula and Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, that he did in 1992, but in Stoker's book, that he was still kind of ugly and repulsive, with a big walrus mustache, Dracula, Count Dracula was, but repulsive, but in a way that we can be repulsed with somebody kind of big and dirty and gross, but not looking like a monster so much.
Well, I think that the writers, who were both Eggers and Heinrich Gehlen,
Yes.
I think they emphasize the Freudian and Jungian elements of, because then we have Johnny Depp's daughter, Lily
Yes,
Rose,
yes,
playing
Lily
the
Rose.
troubled young woman.
Very troubled. And her character's name was Ellen. And she's supposed to be kind of like Mina, the character in a number of the movies and the book, that Dracula really wanted to make his own. And what's interesting, and one of the things I read in my research is, in Stoker's book, and surprising for the time since the book was published in 1897, that she was a resourceful character, and that she was kind of a bit braver than all the menfolk around her. And they've always kind of played down, what a weak person that character of Mina was, but Ellen in this one is kind of truer to the sense of Stoker's book.
I couldn't agree with you more, and what I find so fascinating about this current Nosferatu is that she has troubled, as many human beings are, between the struggle between good and evil.
Yes,
She
exactly.
wants to be the right wife for her husband, John, who isn't really almost worthy of her.
No,
He's
no.
so weak.
Yes.
Jonathan Harder, is it?
Yeah, played by Nicholas Hoult.
Yeah, right.
Who does a good job, but still kind of, but that was a character that's always been kind of portrayed that way. A good-hearted Englishman, almost like an equivalent of a Dr. Watson in a way.
Oh yeah, and some would call him a milquetoast of some sort.
Yes.
But she is attracted in a very elemental, feral way almost.
Exactly.
To this Count Orlok.
Yes.
And for girls who are out there who have been bad girls at some point or another, they should take comfort in this.
Yes.
That Freud and Jung recognize their split parts of our personalities.
Yep.
And I think they do a good job of it.
There's a certain bad girl element about her that also, that particularly when she begins, and it seems like even since childhood, she was kind of under the thrall of, she knew that something was off in her life. And, but one of her lines, to her fiance who becomes her husband, she says, well, he can fulfill me that in ways you never could, or something like that.
Yeah, I know.
An iconic line there, kind of like emasculating her fiance, her lover, but her true lover. And this is the one thing that's always kind of interesting, that I think in probably the other two Nosferatu movies was a little bit possibly not nearly as explicit as this one, of her, and not to give it away, but a lot of people probably know already because it was really one of the things, is Dracula's downfall, Nosferatu in this case, his downfall was being lured into her bedroom where she would keep him until sunrise.
And that's an appropriate place for us to stop.
Yep.
And we want to recommend that our listeners go to WCBE,
Yes.
the podcast experience.
Oh, we've got more to say.
And double take, and we have much more to say. But right now, for the current Nosferatu, what do you recommend, Wayne Miller?
It is not for the young. Leave
You
your
don't
little,
think?
your little baby vampires at home. Oh, geez, from the full frontal nudity, a male nudity.
We get that. We get him.
Yes.
Wow.
And then there's like his little Renfield-like character later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would recommend it to those who love horror movies, and particularly with what I believe is outstanding cinematography that I know I want to talk more about in the podcast.
I'm John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda pop with our